Welcome to Film on Tape, a free audio library for creatives in film and television. My name is Misha Calvert, and I've worked as an actor, writer, director, and producer for many decades. I had so many questions when I was first getting started in New York, and I just wanted fast, free answers. That is what this library is for. The work that you do as a creative is so important. I really hope that this library is going to help get your work out there. Film on Tape is sponsored by Vermilion, a coaching and educational company for creatives. You can learn more at clubvermilion.com. Today I'm going to give you a formula on how to increase your creative output. I know a lot of folks are struggling to move forward right now, in particular, with the creative works that they have, the projects that they have going. And I'm hoping that this structure is going to help. Now, I didn't come up with the terminology that I'm going to use, math and poetry. That's something that came from my writing mentor, John Shear, who's an amazing teacher who's still teaching in New York, acting and writing. So I'm going to borrow from him, but I did expand upon it in a way that I think is really cool and useful, and I hope that you feel the same. So I'm going to share with you some thoughts around this math versus poetry concept and the polarity that it presents to the artistic process. So we're all mathematicians and we're all poets. And what I mean by that is we have a combination of structured thinking and unstructured thinking. So this can go by many names: math, poetry, business, art, emotion, logic, or logic, emotion. And these two polarities represent key aspects of creation that often face off against each other as opposites, but actually they are both essential to the creative process. These two different poles are both critical to making work. Although I'm going to focus on math and poetry as it applies to writing, because that was the construct that I was first introduced to it with and what I'm using it now for, it can be applied to anything creative. It could be applied to acting, to dance, to podcasting, to any of the arts. So the invitation is there to take what I'm talking about and apply it to what your particular medium is right now. So imagine two kind of thought clouds. Imagine two silos. Imagine two columns, and these are the two polarities that I'm speaking about. So we have math, poetry, logic, emotion, structure, exploration, conscious brain, the unconscious brain, controlled, uncontrolled, contracting, expanding, editing versus free writing, the plan versus the dream, discipline versus inspiration, and finally, matter versus spirit. Now, most of us are imbalanced on this, so we will have one more than the other, or we'll have like a lot more of one than the other. You know, maybe, for instance, we've all met someone who is like so controlled and so structured that they have trouble being spontaneous really in any facet of their life. And then on the other hand, I certainly know people who are so uncontrolled and like kind of raw and wild that I wonder how they're still alive, frankly. So these imbalances are normal, and rare is it that anyone is 50-50. I happen to be 50-50, but that's just because I truly think I was born to be 50-50. My SAT scores were 50-50 language and math. I scored the exact same score on both. And I remember being really floored by that because I had always thought of myself as much more unstructured and much more wild and uncontrolled because I grew up in a wild and uncontrolled environment. It was like chaos in my house and, you know, clutter everywhere and all these plants everywhere and, you know, a lot of like pot smoke at times. Not me, but so it was kind of this wild greenhouse of chaos. And I always figured that would be me like forever. And that's why I was so floored when not that the SATs are everything, they're not, but to see that 50-50 score, I was like, oh, maybe I have more structure than I thought. And now in my adult life, I'm finding that I'm far more structured than I am like wild and raw. And part of that's a conscious choice. So I think I've maybe overcorrected for what I saw as a lack of discipline in my early life. But there's also a tendency as we age for us to get more conservative. And this explains a lot just sociologically about the sort of the grumpy older person paradigm, stereotype. But our brains are optimizing to keep us alive. And in order to do so, they tend to become less adventurous over time. So as we age, we naturally gravitate more toward the math, toward the structure. And this is evidenced by the NASA study that I reference. Like, I feel like every time I podcast, I talk about this study of these 1,600 kids who were creative geniuses when they were 5 years old. And by the time they were 35 years old, almost none of them had that same level of creativity. So whether it's social influence or just the natural biological predisposition of our brain to become more math and less poetry, if you want to stay in the poetry and in the sort of raw creative expression, you do, I find, have to work for it. You have to reach for it and cultivate it in your life. So we're going to talk about both columns, however. We're going to talk about the structure and the unstructured today. But first, I have a few questions for you. And if you want, you can pause the episode as we go and write down your answers, or you could just think about it as we're talking. I imagine you sitting right here next to me and maybe sipping on a beverage, and we're just chatting about this. Stuff like this is some of my favorite topics in the whole world. So my question to you is your tendency in art one or the other? Do you know? Do you lean more towards the math or more towards the poetry? Are you more, when you sit down to work on a project, are you more structured or are you more chaotic? Once you've figured out which one it is, I'm curious, is that tendency your own? Or did you pick it up from a caretaker? Like for me, I had wild, raw creativity, and I picked up a lot of that from my parents. What is your authentic expression like on these two polar ends? So there's what you exhibit now, what you picked up from your caretakers, and then there's what maybe you were born with, like the original kind of balance of these two. Do you know your authentic balance in your art? And finally, okay, where would you like to be with these two different categories? Do you want to be more structured? Do you want to be more poetic and more raw in your creative expression? So feel free to write down your responses if you want to pause the episode, or go along with me to this next section, which is how to create more of that poetry. All right, so how to create more poetry in your writing. I'm going to give you some tools to increase the raw creativity in your work. And it is really important for you to experiment with this process and not view it as results driven. There are no wrong answers for this particular side of things. There's no way to fail. You just have to be curious and play and not worry about results. Like when you were a kid playing in the dirt, was there ever a wrong way to play? I mean, maybe like beating your sibling over the head, but other than that, was there a way to like play in the dirt badly? Like, no, you're a kid, you're playing. The point is you're using your imagination and experimenting. So step one is to let your subconscious take over. And what I mean by that is allow your subconscious to take the wheel on creative subjects. And there's a couple of really concrete ways that you can do that. Your subconscious brain is far more powerful than your conscious brain. I throw out the stat of conscious brain processes 134 megabytes of data per second. Subconscious can process up to 11 million megabytes of data per second. So it's like the difference between a drop of water and a bathtub full of water. Like there's no comparison. So couple things you can do to activate your subconscious. You can ask it a question right before you go to bed, and then allow your sleep and your dreams to guide you and show you an answer. Because your subconscious comes forward from the time you start to get sleepy, your brain waves change and you enter a different state of brain. So when you're sleeping as well, with REM sleep and all the stages of sleep relief. So let your subconscious answer questions that your conscious brain can't answer. The second way to increase your subconscious power is to allow yourself to muse in the shower, in the bath, while driving, while cleaning. Basically, you enter a soft trance state when you're in those liminal spaces where you're kind of doing something on autopilot, but not really focusing too much on it. That part that is not focusing on it is going to be able to think about creative projects. Like, I know for me, the shower is one of the places where I get the best ideas. Something about the hypnotic water on my body, and it's like drowning out the noise, and I feel completely alone, and I can focus. And, but in a really soft way, like it's like going into another dimension almost. So those are the two ways to increase your subconscious. I am so excited to tell you that I'm launching a brand new slate of classes that are incredibly helpful on my website. Some of the classes include on-camera acting technique and how to self-produce your own film, actor self-care, which is something that nobody talks about, and how to write a feature film in 10 days, which I'm going to teach you how I did it and how you can do it too. And believe me when I say I poured my heart into these courses. Go to clubvermillion.com. I am so excited about this website. I can't wait to work with you. You can also, if you want to create more poetry, you can increase your inspiration. So fire up your inspiration by going visual. You can cut out pictures. You can make a Pinterest board. You can draw or paint the images that are coming to mind for this project. But the point is to get visual and let your imagination, imagination take over. And that might show you some things about your project that your conscious brain isn't really even thinking about yet. You can also try jotting down the most sensorily alive parts of your project, whether it's a script or a character or a dance. You can write through the 5 senses. What do you see, hear, smell, taste, touch? That might awaken something that, again, is just pre-lingual, pre-math. The third way you can activate your poetry is by asking your body. This has been really, really helpful for me because I used to ignore my body completely, and then I realized my body kind of knows a lot about my projects that maybe my conscious brain doesn't. So you can put on a playlist that you create just for your project. This has literally changed my entire writing life. Take your time creating it. Put some effort into it. If you find the perfect songs for your film or your show, that playlist is really going to help you write it. And then try dancing to the playlist. Let your body teach you about the world and the characters, and just let your body do the talking. I did this with one of my weekly career groups the other night because a couple of the folks were experiencing the same blockage in their lives. And I just knew I felt that it needed to be a somatic solution. So I put on a song for them, escorted them into the other room, and I let them freaking rage. And they danced to these very activating, angry songs. And they both said that they had major breakthroughs after that experience. So if you feel like you're hitting a wall with trying to move forward, try dancing it out and see what your body has to tell you. The number 4 way that you can activate your poetry is by talking to a friend about it. So this is an invitation for you, once this podcast is over, to find a friend who you trust and take them out for a coffee and tell them the most exciting thing about your piece, whatever you're working on. And tell them what it means to you emotionally. Like, really open up, and not just the plot, like the brain plot, but the heart of it. Like, let your emotions speak. And then ask them what resonated with them as you were talking about the piece. And then listen to them. Listen to what they say. Because you hearing that your emotional experience activated something in someone else is really powerful and might open up other emotions that you didn't even know were there. So the invitation is to find someone after you're done listening to this episode and pair up with him and try it. Try to let your emotions speak about your project. Okay, that's poetry. Let's cover math. So for everyone who's like, oh, I have so many ideas, but I can't make it concrete, or I just don't have the discipline, or, you know, I don't have structure, I don't have form to my vision. Well, this part's for you. So this is not about expanding. It's not about becoming more wild and moving out with things. It's actually about moving in and refining and critical thinking, committing to the shape that your project wants to take. So this is often a simpler process than the moving out wild expansion, but it can take longer. It can take longer than the poetry, because sometimes it's just the whittling down of the sculpture, and that just takes a while, instead of the spontaneous, like, oh, I have the idea for the sculpture. The actual crafting of it takes a lot more time sometimes. So speaking about scripts, I'm going to give you I'm going to give you 7 steps for how to create structure with your script. And you should be able to borrow a good part of this for whatever your medium is, but this is for screenwriters. So number 1, you want to learn from tradition. A really great way to do this is watch 3 of your favorite films and then read the screenplay of those films. And you can do it in whatever order you like, but the key is to see how the screenplay was a blueprint for what ended up on screen, and you really learn, oh, that's how they represented that thing on the screen. Oh, that's what they said. That's how they wrote it. That's like the italics that they used, or the spacing that they used. Got it. So let tradition teach you. And then you can also sign up for a screenwriting class. That's what I did. That's how I learned. I didn't go to film school. So I had to take these sort of adult education classes, you know, made for people who've already graduated. And those were great. John Shear has a really good one. Jacob Kruger has a really good one. I love his writing programs. And there's others out there. So sample. If you find someone you like, stick with them. Number 2, you want to start with a log line for your project. And the log line can and probably will change, but start with a log line. Number 3, create an outline. An outline is the whole movie or pilot, just with little slug lines or, you know, scene descriptions of what happens next, what happens next. And then write a treatment. And often writers will do all 3 of these things before they've ever written a single page of script. Why? Because it really helps you understand what you're writing, so that when you do sit down to actually create pages, you can rip through them, because it's mostly just dialogue at that point, and it's really fun. It's really fun once you know what happens and in what order and why. Writing the pages is like the easiest part. So you can kind of alternate amongst logline, outline, treatment, logline, outline, treatment, like bounce around and work on whichever one you want to, or one's going to inform the other, you know. Another thing you can do is build the pitch deck. And the reason that that is so important is because if you're creating a pitch deck and it's image heavy, you're already going to be understanding what is the visual language of this piece. Films speak in images for the most part, TV to a certain extent, but you want to understand, okay, cinematically, what is the world that I'm building? And how can I start to take my words and turn them into a visual experience in the mind's eye of the reader? The deck is also going to help you to understand the movie's marketing, which, let's face it, if you can't market your movie, how satisfying is it really? If nobody sees it. Yeah, you've made a movie, but the whole point is that you want people to see it, right? It's not just for you to watch alone in your room. So marketing is really, really important for a film. Understanding, as John would say, the trailer of the film before you have written it. And a lot of that can be accomplished by creating the pitch deck and having the pitch deck really, really hit. So again, you can work on all this stuff before you write any pages: logline, outline, treatment, pitch deck. Or you can start the pages. I did this recently with a feature film that I'm writing right now, where I'm on the 4th draft. So I would always write an outline first, and then I would churn out the draft. Took me about a month per draft, full feature-length film. And now I've written an outline, and I felt that the outline was going to change once I started writing pages. So I actually abandoned the outline, and I wrote the first half of the script. Well, the first half of the script did follow the outline, but then once I got through it, I was like, the rest of this outline doesn't fit anymore. So now I'm kind of reworking the outline based on what I've already written, because you really can discover more about a character sometimes by getting into a scene and actually writing the dialogue. So this isn't a hard and fast way of doing things, and you're going to find the way that works for you. But if you're intimidated by the idea of writing a script, start with that logline, outline, treatment, and maybe even the pitch deck. Step 6 is to refine all of these things: logline, outline, treatment, deck. And step 7 is to take my How to Write a Feature Film in 10 Days class, which is in the portal for all Vermilion members. I'm very proud of the class, and it's totally possible to write a feature film in 10 days. I've done it several times. The first film I ever wrote got optioned, and that I wrote in 7 days. So if you're fired up and you have an idea of how to approach structure like this, it's in the bag. Okay, so that is most of what I wanted to talk about today. I think the important thing to leave you with is, if you're creating something new, the job is not to be good at whatever you're creating. Like if you're starting to move into a new medium, writing your first script or creating your first dance piece or a new genre of acting or whatever, if it's new for you, the assignment is not to be good. It's not it. You probably won't be good at it. Like that's normal. It would be abnormal for you to be good at something that you've never done before. That would be weird. And yet I constantly see artists putting that pressure on themselves of the first time that they do something, it has to be good. Like, no, where did that come from? The first time you walked, you fell like 5,000 times. The first time you rode a bicycle, the first time you went on a date. First time I went on a date, very bad at it. So don't expect yourself to be good at whatever you're doing. You just have to start and just get through it. Just finish one version of it. And then your job after you finish version 1 is to make version 2 just a little bit better. And then your job with version 3 is to make it just a little bit better than version 2. And if you have that kind of almost childlike exploratory mindset, the math and the poetry is going to flow. Just remember being a kid, playing out in the yard, and how naturally that creativity flowed. And there was structure when you needed it, and there was chaos when you needed that. So I really hope that that you can come back to the joy of creation with these formulas. And I would love to hear what you create on the other side. Thank you so much. I will see you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to Film on Tape. If you like the way that I approach the industry, check out our other classes, consulting, and mentorship at clubvermilion.com. Vermilion is a home for artists and those looking to expand creatively. Whether you're an actor, a film professional, an entrepreneur, or a CEO, we'll help you find your voice and hone your skills to thrive in any market at any scale. You can schedule a free phone consultation at clubvermilion.com.